Violence and violent images permeate more and more aspects of our lives.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas has a lot to tell us, unfortunately, about American culture.
The new video is called Manhunt 2, and at the state capitol, it's creating ripples over the rating system for these games.
Along the years, we've got a ton of games that push the boundary, especially in the 2000s when everyone tried to be as edgy as possible. Now, some of you might argue that Manhunt is the most violent game ever made, or even Hatred, or something like Mortal Kombat. While those games are indeed very graphic and violent, I think there's only one game that takes the cake, and ironically, it's a Marvel game. Before Disney bought Marvel, they tried to be as edgy as possible. In the early 2000s you had movies like Daredevil, Blade, Elektra, and most relevant for this video, The Punisher. More ironically, the most violent video game ever made is a movie tie-in game, kind of. That game is a little hidden gem called The Punisher. But you might say, hey Serial, I'm 100% sure that there are some games that are more graphic than this one. Well, let me ask you this, what other games let you torture people to death? GTA 5 had a scripted mission involving torture, and that received huge backlash, but no other game to my knowledge lets you freely torture people to death like The Punisher does. The game received major backlash at the time and was forced to censor the execution and torture scenes in order to avoid an adult-only rating. And I'm still shocked that they managed to avoid it even with the editing. But that's not the only thing that The Punisher excels at. So get comfortable and let's take a deep dive into this 2005 gem of a game. Before we talk about the Punisher game, we need to talk about the Punisher himself. Because unlike Spider-Man or Superman, Frank Castle wasn't created to inspire people. Unless you are the same type of person who thinks Homelander is the good guy.
I'll laser you, goddammit! I'll laser every fucking one of you!
He wasn't created to be a role model. In fact, his creators have spent decades trying to explain that he isn't a hero at all, unbeknownst to the group of people who are taking the symbol of the Punisher and trying to politicize it. And still, he became one of the most popular comic book characters ever created. To understand why, we need to go back to the 1970s. America wasn't in a great place. The Vietnam War has shattered public trust in the government. Crime rates were climbing across major cities. New York was becoming increasingly associated with violence, corruption, and urban decay, culminating in the 1977 famous blackout when a massive power outage triggered widespread looting and arson across the 5 boroughs. For many Americans, it felt like the people in charge either couldn't solve the problem or just didn't even care to try. Years later, the Punisher creator, Gary Conway, would describe the period as one of social anxiety and frustration. The Vietnam War in particular had fundamentally damaged his generation's trust in the institutions. Gary said in an interview, "For many people of my generation, that was a fundamental social crime that we felt that the government was perpetuating, which by itself sort of undermined your sense of the government as a force of good. It felt like the government is taking on the wrong people and ignoring the people who are really dangerous." And that frustration would eventually find its way into comic books. In 1974, Conway was writing The Amazing Spider-Man and needed a new character to appear in an upcoming storyline. At the time, he had been reading the Executioner novels by Don Pendleton. The books followed Mac Bolan, a Vietnam veteran who returned home and launched a one-man war against organized crime after tragedy destroyed his family. Conway loved the concept, but he wasn't interested in creating a direct copy. Instead, he imagined something closer to a pulp hero, a lone vigilante, a man operating completely outside the law, someone willing to do what traditional heroes wouldn't. The character was originally called The Assassin. Thankfully, that name didn't survive. Marvel editor and legend, Stan Lee suggested a different name, The Punisher, a name that sounded less like a contract killer and more like a force of judgment. The character debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 129 in February of 1974. Conway never expected him to become important. The Punisher was supposed to be a one-off villain, just another obstacle for Spider-Man to overcome before moving on to the next adventure. Instead, readers loved him. Unlike most comic book heroes of the era, Frank Castle didn't arrest criminals, he didn't lecture them, he didn't hand them over to the police, he killed them. That made him controversial from day one, but it also made him impossible to ignore. Visually, the character was just as striking. Conway's original idea involved a small skull emblem on Frank's chest, but Marvel art director John Romita Sr. dramatically expanded the design, turning the skull into the giant white symbol we recognize today. While the creators drew inspiration from proto-paramilitary groups along history, dating back to the 18th century, which had the black flag with the skull on them, backed by governments to do the dirty job without following the rules. Therefore, the skull represents belief of being above the law, a very important characteristic of Frank Castle. The logo drew inspiration from older pulp and comic book imagery like the Shadow. Throughout the 1970s, audiences were becoming obsessed with vigilante stories. Movies like Dirty Harry and Death Wish featured protagonists who took justice into their own hands when institutions failed them. Frank Castle fits perfectly into that cultural moment. The Punisher wasn't fighting alien invasion or supervillains. He was fighting mobsters, drug traffickers, murderers, and street gangs. The kinds of criminals people saw on the evening news. And while many readers viewed him as a hero, his creators saw something very different. To Gary Conway, Frank Castle was never meant to be a role model. He was a cautionary tale, a man consumed by revenge, a character whose willingness to kill made him fundamentally different from heroes like the Spider-Man. Ironically, that moral ambiguity only made him more popular, because if the 1970s created the Punisher, the 1980s would turn him into a superstar. In the 80s, the comic books were changing, characters were becoming darker, more violent, and morally complex. Stories were no longer written exclusively for children, but increasingly for teenagers and adults who had grown up reading comics in the 70s. This decade produced some of the most influential comic books stories ever written. Stories like The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen pushed the medium into far more mature territory, proving that comic books could tackle darker themes without sacrificing popularity. And few Marvel characters benefited from this shift more than Frank Castle. In 1986, Marvel released Punisher: Circle of Blood, a 5-issue limited series that is often credited as the moment the Punisher truly became a standalone franchise rather than just a popular Spider-Man villain. The success of the series was impossible to ignore. Soon after, Marvel doubled down on the character. The Punisher War Journal followed in 1988 and expanded many of the elements that will come to define Frank Castle for the decades to come. The military planning, the surveillance, the meticulous preparation, the feeling that Frank wasn't simply a man with guns, but a one-man special operation unit conducting a never-ending war against crime. These are all elements that will find their way into the 2005 video game. But by the 90s, something strange happened. The entire comic book industry started trying to become the Punisher. Characters become more extreme and violence become more graphic. Anti-heroes were everywhere. New characters like Spawn exploded in popularity, while established characters such as Venom embraced a darker and more aggressive image. The grim vigilante that once stood out from the crowd was suddenly surrounded by imitators, and so the Punisher adopted once again. Series like Punisher Warzone pushed the character even further into the ultra-violent territory that defined the decade. Yet despite all of these reinventions, the version of Frank Castle that would ultimately influence the game wasn't born in the 80s or the 90s. It arrived in 2000, when writer Garrett Ennis took over the character with Welcome Back Frank, and in many ways, this comic would become the blueprint for the version of the Punisher most people will recognize today. By the early 2000s, The Punisher was experiencing a resurgence in popularity. Gareth Ennis had successfully reinvented the character with Welcome Back Frank, and Marvel was eager to capitalize on the renewed interest. Naturally, Hollywood came calling. Released in 2004, The Punisher, starring Thomas Jane as Frank Castle and directed by Jonathan Hensleigh, making his directorial debut. Unlike many comic book movies of the era, Hensleigh wasn't interested in making a larger-than-life superhero spectacle. Instead, he wanted what he described as the mother of all revenge stories, drawing inspirations from comics like The Punisher Year One and Welcome Back Frank. The film stripped away many of the more comic booky elements of the character. Gone were the high-tech gadgets, the battle van, and most of the superhero theatrics. In their place was a grounded vigilante thriller heavily inspired by films like Dirty Harry. The production itself was far from smooth, despite ambitions for a large-scale action movie. The film was made on a relatively modest budget of around $33 million, forcing numerous rewrites and cuts. An entire opening war sequence was scrapped and the crew had only 52 days to shoot the film. Yet despite those limitations, one thing almost everyone agreed on was that Thomas Jane was committed to the role. Jane immersed himself in the comics, gained over 20 pounds of muscle, trained with Navy SEALs, and delivered a version of Frank Castle that many fans still consider one of the character's best live-action portrayals. More importantly, it proved that there was still an audience for The Punisher. In early 2002, Marvel brought THQ on board for a new Punisher game to tie into the upcoming 2004 Thomas Jane movie. Development was handed to Monkey Foot Production, a British developer team known for the Blade 2 movie tie-in game. This version reportedly aimed for a more open-world approach. This would have allowed free-roaming exploration, likely in a New York-style city, with Punisher-style vigilante activities. THQ cancelled the project mid-development when the new CEO decided to bring the project in-house. This led to Monkey Foot to close shortly after. That's when THQ turned to Volition, the studio behind Red Faction. At first glance, Volition might seem like a strange choice for the Punisher game. Before Frank Castle entered the picture, the studio was primarily known for titles like Descent, Free Space, Summoner, and most notably Red Faction. Founded in the early 1990s by former Parallax software developers Mike Kulas and Matt Toshlong, Volition had spent years building a reputation as a technically ambitious studio. Whether it was fully 3D environments of Descent, the massive space battles of Free Space, or the destructible environments of Red Faction, Volition had a habit of pushing technology further than most of its competitors. By the early 2000s, the studio had become one of THQ's most valuable development teams. More importantly, they had already proven they could make action games. Lots of action games. While Red Faction focused on explosive firefights and environmental destruction, Volition projects often blended shooting, narrative, and larger-than-life set pieces in a way that would prove surprisingly useful for The Punisher. And that's important to remember, because when people look back at The Punisher today, they often assume it was made by a small licensed game team, trying to cash in on a movie release. It wasn't. This was a project handed to one of THQ's most experienced studios, and that experience shows. By late 2003, after the cancellation of Monkey Foot's version of the game, Volition inherited the license and began building what would eventually become The Punisher. The challenge was simple: create a game that captured the brutality of Frank Castle, appealed to fans of the upcoming movie, and what Volition came up with was something far stranger than a typical movie tie-in game. The influence of games like Max Payne and Manhunt is impossible to miss. The gunplay, the dark atmosphere, the excessive violence, it's all very early 2000s. And yet, despite those obvious inspirations, The Punisher manages to carve out an identity of its own. Somehow, it's both more brutal and funnier than either of those games. A big part of that comes from Volition's approach to the license. Early in development, the studio made a surprising decision. Rather than simply retelling the events of the 2004 movie, they would create an original story that pulled from decades of Punisher comics. This was highly unusual for a movie tie-in game. Thomas Jane returned to voice Frank Castle, lending the project an extra layer of authenticity. Volition wasn't interested in recreating the film scene for scene. Instead, they wanted to build the most comic-accurate Punisher experience possible, and Marvel actually let them do it. Rather than being restricted to the movie's plot, Volition was given access to the wider Punisher universe. Characters, storylines, and ideas from across Frank Castle's comic book history suddenly became fair game, and that's probably why the game has aged so much better than most licensed games from that era. Thomas Jane's commitment to the character is evident throughout the entire game. Unlike many celebrity voice appearances that feel rushed or phoned in, Jane sounds fully invested in the role, delivering one of the most memorable performances in any comic book game of that era. The problem was, the ESRB wasn't too happy about that. The game was simply too violent, and not in the usual video game sense. By 2004, players had already seen plenty of blood and gore. But the Punisher was doing something different. The game's centerpiece was its interrogation system. Instead of simply killing enemies, Frank Castle could capture them and force information out of them using a wide variety of persuasion techniques. And by persuasion, I mean things like throwing someone's head into a piranha tank.
Hey, Tommy, check out these piranhas! Hands up, asshole!
Dangling them over industrial grinders, or introducing them to various pieces of heavy machinery. Some would call that torture. The CIA calls it enhanced interrogation techniques. Volition reportedly created over 100 unique interrogation and execution scenarios. The problem wasn't just the violence, it was the fact that the player was actively participating in it. In 2004, nearly a year before release, Volition's Dan Cermak brought an early build of the game directly to the ESRB. The verdict was exactly what he feared. If released in that state, the Punisher would likely receive an adults-only rating. And in 2004, that was essentially a death sentence. Major retailers refused to stock adults-only games. Consoles manufacturers wanted nothing to do with them. An adult-only rating would have killed the game before it even reached store shelves. Volition had a choice: cut the interrogation system entirely or find a way to trick the rating board. Thankfully, they chose the second option. The solution was surprisingly clever. Whenever an interrogation became too graphic, the game suddenly switched to a stylized black and white filter. Blood lost its color, the camera pulled away from the action. Some of the most brutal moments happened partially off-screen. While the violence was still there, you couldn't see every detail. According to Volition, the inspiration came from Kill Bill, which used a similar technique to get around censorship, and it worked. The ESRB granted the Punisher a mature rating. Their interrogations survived. The game shipped, and what started as a compromise ended up becoming one of the game's most recognizable features. Ironically, the censorship may have made the Punisher even more memorable, because 20 years later, people still remember those black and white interrogation sequences. One thing that surprised me while researching the game was how much Volition's future was already hidden inside the Punisher. The game wasn't built on a brand new technology. Instead, Volition used their proprietary CTG engine, a heavily modified evolution of the technology previously used in Red Faction 2. In fact, the same technological lineage would rather evolve into the engine used by Central, making the Punisher a strange bridge between two very different eras of studio's history. Rather than focusing on Red Faction's famous geomod destruction technology, the team shifted their attention toward character interaction, animation systems, and Havoc-powered physics. This is a game where Frank Castle spends half his time grabbing criminals, using them as a human shield, and throwing them across the rooms. The improved animation blending, inverse kinematic systems, and physics simulations helped make these interactions feel surprisingly believable for a licensed game released in 2005. While The Punisher wasn't trying to compete with graphical showcases like Half-Life 2 or Doom 3, it succeeded in something arguably more important, making violence feel physical. So after 30 years of comic book history, a Hollywood movie, a cancelled prototype, an ESRB battle, and an ambition development cycle, the question remains, was the game actually any good? The game begins with this awesome cutscene showing the Punisher beating the living hell out of these dudes. After the cutscene, we get to the menu. This menu, in my opinion, is one of the most inventive menus in any comic book games. The menu itself is in the Punisher's room, and each option takes you to a different part of the room. If you choose, for example, the armory, it will go to the Punisher's weapon locker, where upon clicking any weapon, you get a short description from the Punisher. If you click the War Journal, it will go to the board where Frank collects news articles, which reflects the action of the Punisher after each mission. If you press the Criminal Chart button, you will get a classic chart of each criminal that you are hunting, with a short description of who they are from Frank's perspective. For now, let's discuss the actual gameplay of the Punisher. As you've probably figured it out by now, the Punisher is a third-person shooter, heavily inspired by games like Max Payne. While you don't have a bullet time feature, the ability to jump forward or backwards is taken straight out of Max Payne. Frank can carry two types of weapons, usually a small handgun type of weapon and a heavy type of weapon. For each type, the Punisher can dual wield, even with two shotguns at the same time, which looks straight out of the Matrix. The weapons all feel different and the shooting feels responsive. The Punisher can take any weapon that he finds on the ground or that enemies drop. While carrying two heavy weapons at the same time, the Punisher cannot reload the weapons without throwing away one of them. While running like a maniac in the direction of the enemies while jumping in the room with two AKs in your hands, Frank can also downsight. While pressing the F button, the accuracy for each weapon increases and the recoil is reduced, but Frank's mobility is heavily affected. If Frank gets close to an enemy, he can execute the enemy on the spot, and the animation is different for each type of weapon, and also changes based on the number of weapons you have in your hand. These are brutal and funny at the same time. Imagine living a whole life just to go out like this, or like this, or even like this. Besides the fire weapons, the Punisher can also pick throwable weapons like chopping knives, baseball bats, crowbars, and so on. With each he can brutally execute enemies. While in close quarter, Punisher can also grab enemies, basically making the enemy a shield against the bullets. In this stance, Frank can either interrogate or even throw enemies, and this can be very funny to use, especially when the game's environment invites you to throw enemies in all kinds of places. Besides the firearms, you usually get throwables like grenades and flashbangs and even Molotov cocktails. You know, the usual. There are some pretty fun guns to use in this game. You get a flamethrower that looks cool, but you have to wait for the enemies to die before stepping over their burned bodies. And my personal favorite, the grenade launcher, which makes the enemy's limbs and head explode at the same time when using it from close range. Frank also has a meter, where he enters a state where he throws two knives, doesn't take damage, and refills his health after each kill. And in this state, the executions are also different, killing enemies more quickly. Also, you get this filter over the screen, as you hear the screams of Frank's past victims pleading for help in despair. I guess this is a PTSD meter? Yeah, it's a PTSD meter. What other game has a PTSD meter? I know Manhunt didn't have one, neither did Max Payne. Now the time has come to discuss the notorious interrogations and the main source of the controversy for this game. While grabbing an enemy, the Punisher can choose to interrogate him in 4 basic ways. You can either punch the enemy until they give out everything they know. You can smash their heads against the floor. You can choke them. Or, if you have a sidearm, you can point a gun to the enemy's head to scare him into submission. While interrogating the enemy, you have to move the cursor in a way in which you make sure that you don't kill the enemy by mistake, which happened to me a lot. But Frank doesn't seem to mind it. Even throws some good one-liners.
Good worker. Kept his nose to the grindstone.
Throughout the game you can also receive points that you can use Frank's abilities, which in itself provokes more controversy. If you kill an enemy during an investigation, your score goes down. Basically, the game doesn't reward you for killing your enemy during the torture session. But if you let him go and kill him immediately after, you still get points for killing that enemy. Which goes to show that the whole penalty system, in my opinion, was added as a last-minute effort to not get an adult rating from ESRB. Besides the casual torture methods, Frank also can use environmental special interrogations, which sounds like something taken straight out the CIA textbook. Basically, Frank can use different scenarios in the environment element to interrogate his enemies. This is where the most gruesome part of this game comes from, and the parts that they had to heavily censor in order to get the game to come out with a mature rating. I'm half joking, but imagine getting a job at the time at Volition and having to come with ways in which the Punisher kills his targets after interrogation. And you come with the idea of placing the enemy with their belly over the cage of a rhino, while the rhino tries to impale them, just to find out that this is already in the game. Volition staff were sick. How do they even came up with the ideas for some of these interrogations? Just look at this one. I just know that the guy that came out with this idea catch some side eyes from at least one of the colleagues. While the execution of the interrogation is heavily censored, if you want, you can find a patch on the internet that removes the white and grey filter. I did not use this patch. I think the censoring and the implication of what happens makes the game more gruesome, and also I don't want to get age restricted on my second video ever. As I've mentioned before, I think The Punisher is the most violent game ever made, for the simple fact that you can torture people to death. This is a very messed up feature to have in your game, but what saves The Punisher is the fact that the game doesn't take itself so serious. It has charm, it's funny. Besides environmental interrogations, you also have environmental executions. They are all gruesome, but pretty funny at the same time. Speaking of fun, the AI in this game is one of the most underrated parts of this game, and never see it being discussed that much by critics. While the enemy's behavior is not the best, as they tend to run like crazies in front of you, they can also take cover. They can throw themselves to the cover as well, or throw a table to create cover, or even throw the table at Frank, or even a TV. If you shoot their weapon from their hands, they will take out their sidearm. If you shoot their sidearm, they will go look for another weapon on the ground. If you miss your shots, the enemies will mock you for your bad aim.
You can't aim worth this shit!
They will taunt you and insult you and say funny things while in combat. They can even announce when they are out of ammo and reloading. And the most important thing is that the enemy reacts to your actions with fear. This is special because it was popularized by Batman Arkham Asylum in 2009. Well, if you think about it, there was a prototype of some sort in the Batman Begins video game, but The Punisher is the game that really did it well before. In Arkham Asylum, for those who don't know, as you hunt more enemies, the other enemies will become more fearful and scared of you, making mistakes and becoming more paranoid. While this is not the depth that The Punisher had, when you execute enemies in brutal fashion, the other enemies might surrender. They might stumble while running away from you. They might drop to their knees, or more relatable, they can shit their pants as soon as they see the Punisher and plead for their life.
Why me? It's my first day! Ha!
Even while interrogating enemies, they begin by mocking the Punisher, but slowly they start to become more desperate. In more than one scenario, you can decide to free the enemies after interrogation, so they can either help you find an enemy or even telling his friends to back down. Some may even try to trick you in freeing them and then immediately trying to kill you. You can even secretly stick a bomb to this guy and convince him to distract his friends, only for the bomb to explode as soon as he reaches his friends. You also have special enemies that you can interrogate to get vital information about the mission. These enemies are indicated by this color here. They might give information about some secret ammo stash or weapon locations, but you can also interrogate regular enemies, and randomly an enemy could say something that would trigger Frank's PTSD, giving the player a comic book image as a collectible. Often you can also eavesdrop on enemies having different discussions, and these are almost always worth listening to because they are funny. This is where 50% of the humor comes from, hearing these dumbasses having conversations about the Punisher or even about other heroes from Marvel. A thing that I was a little disappointed by was the level of environment destruction in this game, especially coming from the dev team that made Red Faction. While you can still break glass, bottles and tiles with your bullets, it's just not on the level of something like Max Payne 3, for example. While shooting the enemies, you can destroy each limb depending on the weapon and the range from which you shoot at. You can even make the heads of your enemies explode with a well-placed headshot. There are several types of enemies in the game, some wearing armor, some a different color, that don't go down immediately after a headshot, and if you headshot them, they drop the headset. Often, you will also meet with victims or even allies that you are not allowed to shoot, and if you do, Frank immediately dies and drops to the ground like he expires. You also have to save the victims, and if you successfully rescue a victim, you get a small amount of health back after talking with the victim. After each mission, you get a score breakdown where you can either get a bronze, silver, or even gold medal. You can also choose your starting weapons before each mission, and after finishing the missions you can also unlock a challenge mode, making the game somewhat more replayable. Looking back, the Punisher isn't the most technically impressive shooter of his generation, but every mechanic, every execution, every interrogation, every terrified criminal begging for mercy serves a single purpose: to make you feel like the Punisher. The story of the Punisher is pretty simple, and that shouldn't be taken as an insult. The story is solid, coherent, mostly, and straightforward, kind of. After the first cutscene, where the Punisher kills all those enemies, he surrenders to the police. The whole game is a retelling of the events through the lens of what the investigators managed to conclude. The game begins with Frank in the interrogation room at the Rikers Island, where Detective Soap and Lieutenant Richthofen are trying to good cop, bad cop information out of the Punisher. Lieutenant Richthofen suggests that we need to go back to the beginning of the story, 3 weeks ago, in a crack house, where all good stories begin. The first mission starts with the Punisher walking through the dark streets of New York City, monologuing about the scum of the city. Walking through the dark alley, you observe an individual gentleman trying to rob a lady. After rescuing the lady, we get our thanks from her. We move forward, where we can observe 2 executions from the upstairs floor, followed by this interaction.
Larry, look! It's the fucking Punisher!
No shit! Hey, asshole! Come get some!
Yeah, dipshit! We ain't scared of you!
Shit, Tom. What if he really does come up here?
Inside the building, we get our first interrogation on Maurice. We get the information that this place is run by someone called Damage. We shoot our way through the building. We eventually get to another section where 2 people are executed in similar fashion as the one from the beginning. But here, you can also throw enemies through the window. Past this section, we can save another lady, and we can special interrogate this dude by slamming the window on his neck with full force. In the next room, we can find a lady of the night. She offers to have some fun with us, to which Frank doesn't actually flat out refuses. but states that he doesn't have the time.
You don't know what you're missing.
I think I do.
In the next room you find two potheads that watch a disconnected TV and they think that Frank is a hallucination. We make our way to the top floor where we stumble upon Damage, the leader of the crack house. We dangle him over the roof to make him spill the beans, but we still throw him to his death. Frank gets out of the building, looking at Damage's body, looking real proud of what he has done, when a car rushes him, but the Punisher, to athletic abilities, manages to dodge in time. Bad news for the person in the car, Frank got the license plate. Back at the apartment, we get this news coverage article. The next mission takes place after Frank tracks down the car that tried to run him over, and it takes him to an illegal chop shop. We slaughter our way through the chop shop. We also meet this truck driver, who tells us that he wasn't aware that anything illegal was taking place at the chop shop. At the same time, he gives us the location for some flashbangs in the back of the truck. We continue onwards and we find out that the chop shop is owned by the Gnucci Mafia, and we can also interrogate this bastard by knocking his head into the toilet. And we can also interrogate this enemy by throwing him with his head in what I assume is mercury.
Shit! Oops.
We get to Duca, the chop shop owner. Duca admits that Bobby Gnucci is his boss after some convincing. The next section takes place in the auto graveyard. We'll make our way to a car and we take our exit. Back at the apartment, we get this funny news clipping where it paints the Punisher as an absolute maniac, more than he is, by reporting that he is killing auto mechanics. Next up, we decide to give Bobby Gnucci a visit at the Lucky's Bar, a bar owned by the Gnucci's mob, according to Frank, as he assures us that no distant folk is hanging around that bar. Maybe I'm thinking this one too much, but this shows how actually psychotic Frank Castle is. He's convincing himself that everyone is a bad guy just because they hang up at a bar. In his mind, hanging around there is enough of a reason for Frank thinking that you deserve to die. Or maybe it's a way for the devs to assure us that we can go mayhem without a second thought. The mission opens up at the bar, where Detective Soap is very uncomfortable going to the bathroom. We take control of Frank at the bar without anyone knowing that we are here to rain punishment. Hilarious given the fact that Frank is literally wearing the skull on his shirt. At the bar we can hear this hilarious dialogue about Daredevil.
Hey, do you think Daredevil could take Sonny Corleone?
You dumbass lush. Daredevil is a comic book character.
We immediately kill everybody in the bar alongside Bobby. And as an exception, we actually get an accurate news clipping reporting that the Punisher shut up a mob bar. Arriving back at the apartment, we notice a photo on our door, portraying Bushwhacker, a classic Punisher villain with a weapon for an arm, taking our neighbor hostage, telling us to go to the Central Zoo so we can rescue her. We go to the Central Zoo and we are immediately met with the woodchopper.
No, don't, you freaking psycho!
We shoot our way through the opening part of the zoo until we reach the zoo itself, and we get ambushed and we see that these idiots also kill the animals. In my opinion, this is the best level in the game. You can kill enemies in an Aztec altar with a ritual knife. You can place their heads on the side of the water fountain and stomp their heads in. You can feed them to piranhas as well. Basically, Volition thought about every way in which you can violate every human rights possible in a zoo. So this level gets the United Nations approval.
Good, Rhino. Nice team up.
We eventually have to make a choice if we want to fight Bushwhacker or save our neighbor. We save her from this cage and the mission ends. We found throughout our mission that the Gnucci family is ruled by Ma Gnucci, and according to Frank's observation in the criminal chart, family is her weakness. When enemies are interrogated, they give a brief explanation that Ma is incredibly upset that we've killed Bobby at the bar. You also get this clipping showing the Punisher punching a polar bear, while the news reporting that we killed the animals at the zoo, and that we made the children cry. Next mission has the best opening for a mission in gaming's history. The Punisher goes to the funeral of Bobby to slime out everyone. The mission opens with Frank finding Bobby's casket, and the cold bastard just takes him out and throws him in the garbage bin, and enters the coffin. While in the coffin, we hear Ma interacting with some henchmen, and, well, just listen to this.
They're ready.
bringing the body. And hey, assholes, try not to drop it this time.
Shit, no. Might have our balls for that.
Damn, this thing's heavy. They shipping coke in Bobby's box too?
Hey, waste not, want not. Ma's not exactly sentimental, you know. Shut up, assholes. Show some respect.
I want to see my boy. Open it up.
No, Ma, you can't. He's all tore up.
That bastard, I'll kill him. I'll rip him apart with my bare hands.
Calm down, Ma. We're all emotional here.
I'll show you emotional, you little shit. I'll rip your balls off and feed them to the dogs.
Tony, Vinny, get over here. Ma's overcome by her grief. Escort her back to the mansion.
Punisher! That bastard, I'll kill him, I swear it!
Come on, Ma, we'll go to the mansion, torture those two guys in the basement, and you'll feel better.
This is why I said that this is one of the funniest comic book games. Just by this interaction alone, I love Ma already. And now we take full control of Frank. Everybody is crying at the funeral, while Frank is in the casket.
It's the Punisher!
Tell me this isn't the most badass opening to a mission you've ever seen. Luckily, there weren't any women or children at the funeral. The Punisher starts shooting up the funeral house, giving us one of the funniest special executions in the game, where Frank can throw an enemy in the coffin, alongside a grenade, then closing the coffin. Also, if you guess that you can cremate an enemy while interrogating him, well, you are wrong. And there's something very messed up about you. Why would you even think about that?
That's a smell you don't forget.
We then head to what appears to be a house next to the morgue, where we meet the funeral house owner that shows his appreciation for helping out the business by killing so many people. We then have a shootout with Eddie Knucci, another son of Ma, in the attic. We manage to cheese him, and then we proceed to throw him out of the window, and the mission ends. We get this funny news clipping, and then we proceed to the next mission, the Knucci estate, to ascend justice upon poor Ma. The mission opens up outside of the villa, and this is the first mission where Frank's outfit changes. Basically, he ditches the leather trench coat and takes a more Rambo-like fashion choice. The first thing we can hear is this dialogue.
Louis, how many bodies we dumped down this well?
I don't know. I can't count that high.
So, must be more than 10, eh?
Yeah, I guess. Hey, fuck you. At least I finished 4th grade.
Only 'cause you cheated off of me, dumbass.
We can later interrogate enemies by throwing them in the same well. We fight our way inside the villa, where Bushwhacker shoots the floor and the Punisher finds himself in the cellar. In this area, something really interesting happens. If you go into this room, you can find someone who has clearly been interrogated to death. Proceeding to the next room, we find a man in a cage. He says that his friend was taken to the same room we find that person killed on the chair. We notify him of his friend's demise. He gives instructions to Frank on how to find the key to free him. Frank goes downstairs through a hidden passage where he finds more enemies, but upon interrogating an enemy, he tells Frank that the two men upstairs were captured because they sold drugs to one of Ma's relatives. Frank goes upstairs to free the man, but says this:
Not so fast. Heard you sell drugs.
And immediately the crosshair that tells us that we cannot kill him changes, indicating that this is now an enemy. Frank doesn't differentiate between a killer, or a drug dealer, or a thief, or even a scammer. In Frank's demented point of view, they all deserve to die. They are just bad, rotten. Which makes you think, how different are we from the Knuccis that took that drug dealer and interrogated him to death, when we've been doing the same for the entirety of the game. Anyway, we shoot our way upstairs and we can interrogate enemies by pushing their head into the fireplace, and you can also push enemies' heads through a bear trap. Ma is really fascinated by wild animals. She even has several stuffed polar bears. We eventually get to the library, where we fight Bushwhacker. After you defeat him, you get this interaction.
Can't leave Bushwhacker like this. He's got so much hardware in him, someone will patch him together again. Have to make a hole too big to patch. That should do it.
You bastard! What are you doing?
Disarming you.
The villa catches on fire and the time limit clock begins. We need to find Ma and kill her. We eventually get to her and we proceed to throw her out of the window, killing her in the process.
Got what I came for. Time to leave.
Back at the apartment, we get this news clipping which shows a photo of Ma, but the title confirms that she is indeed dead. I find it fascinating that Ma is a subversion of the typical mob patriarchy, as she is the leader of the organization as a woman. I never met this concept before in any mafia movies or media. I think this is what makes Ma so unique and iconic, even though we barely see or hear her. Next up we go to the docks, as it seems like the drugs are flowing to the Gnucci organization from the Russians. We shoot some henchmen, and then we find Black Widow. She tells us that she is here on official business, as she received that there is information that a nuke was smuggled by the Russians. From now on, for the rest of the mission, we partner up with Black Widow. We shoot a lot of enemies, we feed them to sharks, we destroy a boat with a crane, and eventually we fight a big tank, marking the end of the mission. To be honest, I felt a drop in quality from this point on, and this mission is one of the worst in the game. Maybe it's the boring copy and pasted environments. It doesn't help that this is the only area that is reused in a future mission, and it's in one of the two boats that already took off. Black Widow picks one boat, the Punisher another. Back at the apartment we get another incredible news clipping. The next mission has the Punisher hunting for the nuke. This section's main villain is General Krakow, a brilliant tactician capable of anything that needs to be neutralized, according to Frank. As soon as we start the mission, we are greeted by this dialogue.
It is not the sea that makes you sick. It is the vodka and pickled eggs for breakfast.
Yes, Nikolai. Stop eating pickled eggs. You are stinking up the ship.
Naturally, we kill all the enemies and we proceed to plant bombs on the boat. We get to cut this guy in half.
Let me go now!
Measure twice, cut once.
After planting the bombs, we find out that the Russians are also human trafficker, which pisses Frank off, as if the Russian being terrorists who are about to smuggle a nuclear weapon is not enough. We kill everyone on the ship and rescue this girl. Another highlight is getting to drive a pitchfork over this poor guy. The mission ends with Frank taking the girl and leaving the boat while detonating the bombs. Turns out that again the nuke was not on the boat. The next mission starts with Frank getting home to his apartment where he unloads his weapons. Pause. When someone knocks at the door.
Hello, big boy.
This mission takes place entirely in Frank's apartment and it's an almost identical interpretation of the scene in the movie with the Russian. That scene was so good that they needed to make an exception and put it into the game, and I'm very glad that they did it. In this boss battle you don't have any firearms, not that they will work on the Russian. You only have melee weapons that you can throw at the Russian. Basically you have to let him attack you until he tires out. That's when you jump on his back and use the environment to attack him. After going through all the walls in the apartment, Frank finally defeats the Russian, but surprise, the Russian disappears. Another highlight of this mission is the news clipping that we get after the mission is done. Next up, the Punisher decides to take matters into his own hands again and fly to the island where the general took the nuke. Even the investigators were confused about how Frank managed to get to the island. Well, it's never explained. Apparently this is a guy named Hackett. He never appeared in any comics, nor in the movie. Punisher was flew to the island by this guy Hackett. Now we need to take a moment to discuss how cool this outfit is. We continue our way to the jungle when we eventually meet a friend, Nick Fury. Turns out there is a comic written by Garth Ennis, starring the Punisher and Nick Fury, titled Punisher and Fury, that also takes place in a jungle, so this is most likely the inspiration for this mission. We team up with Nick until we reach a point where we meet the general. Here Nick takes off running after the general and we are left to deal with the henchmen. We take this launch pad to the nuke. In a cutscene we see that Nick was knocked out by the Russian.
You got knocked the fuck out!
We arrive near the nuke where we get to fight the Russian again. but this time the boss battle is awful. After defeating the Russian, we get to set the general on fire by pushing him under the nuke. Immediately after, we get a cutscene where Frank manages to jump on a moving plane while also carrying Nick on his back, while also killing the pilot. Next mission takes place in the Fisk building. Yeah, that Fisk, the Kingpin. We shoot everyone in the building until we meet with Bullseye. And I have to give it to them, the costume is incredible and very comic book accurate. He even acts like a dipshit that you want to strangle.
Hard to miss a guy with a target on his forehead.
Throws knives and dances around like a ballerina until you shoot him enough times in the head until he runs away. The little bold fucker. We get to the Fisk's main office, where we defeat Bullseye again and throw him out of the window. I detect a pattern with Frank and dangerous heights. Maybe it's a preference. Even Kingpin asks us if we want to throw him out of the window, after disarming us from behind, to which Frank responds with,
"No, you would have to roll."
Wilson proceeds to tell us that we've been manipulated by a mysterious figure, to make Frank think that Fisk was behind the attacks against him, and that Frank was used as a pawn to take out the Knucci and the Russian mafia, then proceeds to run without any explanation. Frank makes his way out of the building that is attacked by what seems to be the Triad. Funnily enough, right next door there's a gym where Frank can execute enemies by dropping dumbbells on their heads. We exit the building and the mission ends. We cut back to Lucky's bar, where one of Punisher's moles tells him that the guys that attacked the Fist Tower are actually a Yakuza group called the Eternal Sun, and the whole plan was put together by a mysterious figure named Jigsaw. Now, if you are familiar with the Punisher, you know who Jigsaw is. He was portrayed in the Warzone movie and in the show. Basically, Jigsaw is what Joker is to the Batman. The scene cuts back to the present, in the interrogation room, and suddenly...
Hold it right there. Anything my client has said without his attorney present is inadmissible.
Yes, that is Matt Murdock himself, the Daredevil, ready to save the day. The Punisher tells him to fuck off, and he leaves never to be seen again in the game.
Oh, nice of him to stop by. Where were we?
The mission ends and we get this news clipping. The next mission takes us back to the docks where nothing of substance happens. We help these SHIELD agents to take down the Yakuza. And honestly, I dislike this mission more than the first one that took place at the docks. It feels like they wanted to pad out the runtime of the game. And it's weird because this is the only area that is being reused in the game. Next we go to the meat packing plant, where Frank reports that the Gnucci used it to package drugs. We arrive at the location where both the Gnuccis and the Yakuza are going at each other. The setting for this mission is cool, and you can throw enemies in a meat grinder, but it gets repetitive real fast with its maze-like environments. You rescue some prisoners taken by the Yakuza, then you find the hidden lab where the drugs are packaged. The mission ends abruptly, and we get a cutscene where Frank goes back to the Luckies, where the mole tells us the Jigsaw is actually John Saint, the guy who killed Frank's whole family. The Punisher blew him to pieces, but he still survived, and it's all messed up in the face. He also tells us that the Yakuza plans to hit the Stark Tower. Yes, Tony Stark's tower, the Iron Man. Next mission opens up with Frank in a tour at the Stark Tower, where everything turns to shit as the Yakuza attacks the building. As far as environments goes, this mission is awesome and a breath of fresh air. We also get to see Iron Man. You can also cut people in half with lasers. Also, listen to this remark from Frank.
Tony seems to have some size issues.
We make our way through the building until we find this helicopter type of boss, and Frank makes his exit before Iron Man could have a discussion with him.
I need a drink.
We go to the Yakuza's headquarters. Entering the building, we hear another discussion about the Daredevil.
Sasano took 100 guys, all hopped up on MGH.
100 guys?
On MGH.
Wow, shit.
Yes, so he took these 100 guys and attacked this blind guy.
Daredevil.
Yes, but the blind guy took them all out.
100 guys hopped up on MGH?
That's what I'm saying. They all ended up in hospital or jail.
But we face the Punisher, not Daredevil.
We will all end up dead.
Unfortunately for them, they are indeed dealing with the Punisher. This mission is another difficulty spike, as the leader of the Yakuza goes through an elevator and we need to interrogate a white-suited enemy so they can open the elevator for us. But the thing is that enemies respawn endlessly, and if your white-suited enemy dies, you need to find another one. After taking the elevator, we go to the top of the floor where we enter this nice apartment. We find the leader of the Yakuza and tells us that Jigsaw tricked him as well, and that he controls the Yakuza now. He tells us that he made a secret tip to the police about Jigsaw's whereabouts. He gives us an option: either we kill him with the ceremonial sword, or he gets his assassins to kill us. After we kill him with the sword, the assassins commit self-deletion in classic samurai way. We proceed to find a hidden exit that lets us go down to exit the building. This is actually the moment from the beginning of the game where the Punisher surrenders to the police.
Time to get moving. Still more to do. Takagi's taken care of, but others are harder to reach.
And don't do anything stupid.
Hey, let me through. I'm the Punisher task force.
Come on, please. You're embarrassing me here.
Remember, Rikers.
Yeah, I remember.
We cut to the present day, where the Punisher chloroforms Lieutenant Richthofen. It's also revealed that Soap was working with us the whole time. This is the last mission of the game, and it takes place in the prison during a riot. It's a very awesome premise, and before leaving, the Punisher tells Soap that he literally plans to kill the whole prison. And we do exactly that. We kill a ton of prisoners, while also saving guards.
Don't kill me! I'll go back to my cell!
Here, you got something to tell me.
Oh, let me go! I was almost out of here!
This culminates in a terrible boss fight with Jigsaw, that now has an Iron Man suit. Frank kills Jigsaw and escapes before the police can catch him again. And that's the game. Look, the story is not the best, and it seems like the devs first planned which character would appear in the game, and what areas will be featured in the game, and then proceeded to write the story around it. Like, let's talk about Jigsaw. We literally don't even see or hear from him from the entirety of the game before fighting him, and he's the main villain of the game. I'm not trying to be too harsh, because at the same time I'm happy that we've got to experience more than one villain and arc in the game. At the end of the day, the story is serviceable, and I'm thrilled that we've got cameos from Daredevil, Fisk, Fury, Black Widow, and even Iron Man. While you cannot say that The Punisher is one of the best looking games of that era, the game surprisingly holds up when the devs are trying. There are some very pretty looking levels with high level of detail, with surprisingly good texture, but there are also levels that look plain bad and boring. The most impressive looking level has to be the Central Zoo. The rain effect is a highlight of the visual presentation. You also have some very nice reflections-like effects, with the aquarium reflecting on the ground. Another incredible feature is the rain that drops on the glass roof. This scene is incredibly beautiful. While you have beautiful scenes like this, you also get some ugly looking missions, or at least uninspired, like the Docks mission. The interiors are very well done and very detailed, and actually vary from mission to mission. In fact, I think this is the game's biggest strength. The variety in mission environments. You jump from the insides of a boat to a jungle to a luxury building from mission to mission. Every detail and object looks like it belongs there, even the environmental interrogation subjects.
Don't let that snack spoil your dinner.
The guns all look different and they leave rounds on the ground like a real gun. When burning enemies, you can actually see how they gradually burn to death. The dismemberment system is also pretty gruesome and looks the part. The other NPCs look decent and main ones look good, but the star of the game is Frank himself. You can feel the detail that they put into his design, from the leather trench coat flopping when Frank moves, to his detailed leather gloves, to even the design of the skull itself. Another thing that this game does perfectly in terms of visual presentation is the UI itself. Every button on the menu looks like a comic book piece of paper. The health and the PTSD meter all look good and stylish. Also, the game should work on every machine that you can buy nowadays. I didn't have any issues with the game or its performance. The game dipped a few frames when entering this particular area with the frozen meat. Otherwise, it was a pretty smooth experience. The audio presentation is another highlight of the game. The soundtrack was primarily composed by Sonic Fuel, with additional music by Corey Jackson and Gerard Marino. The theme song especially is incredible. You also get some techno tracks on here. Overall is a very good soundtrack. The sound effects are incredible as well. All the guns sound different and accurate. When Frank executes enemies, you can hear the flesh tearing apart, the bones cracking, which helps build the gruesomeness of the game. I have nothing bad to say about the audio presentation. The game sounds and looks phenomenal to this day, except maybe a few areas, but nothing that ruins the experience overall. We also need to discuss the voice acting. If there is one person that absolutely understood the assignment, it's Thomas Jane. By the time the game entered development, Jane had already spent months living as Frank Castle while filming the 2004 movie. Rather than treating the game as a quick paycheck, he returned to voice the character himself, and the difference is immediately noticeable. Unlike many licensed games of that era, where celebrity performances often felt rushed or completely disconnected from the source material, Jane sounds fully committed throughout the entire experience. Every line carries the same exhausted anger that defined his portrayal in the film, whether he's threatening a criminal, mocking a mobster, or simply commenting on the state of New York City.
New York City. Forget the things you've heard about the place. About the new New York. Hell's Kitchen is called Clinton. park full of tourists. But it's not real. The old New York is waiting just below the surface. There's nothing to help you when the darkness falls. You're laid open so the world can rummage in your guts. Just because the mayor chased away the monsters, chased them to Brooklyn and the Bronx, don't think this place has changed. Not in its heart. Not where it lives. Do not fall in New York City. No one's gonna catch you.
Jane sells the illusion that this is the same Frank Castle that we saw on the screen. The supporting cast is equally impressive. Mark Nucci steals every scene that she appears in, perfectly balancing intimidation and absurd comedy.
Get out of my house! Haven't you caused me enough pain?
Not yet.
Bushwhacker feels appropriately unhinged.
Let you out of the zoo? Just shoot yourself and save me the bullet.
Smile, Castle! You're gonna see your family again!
While characters like Bullseye and Kingpin sounds exactly as over-the-top as you would expect from a comic book adaptation.
Someone. Where's Kingpin, Bullseye?
The big guy can't see you now, Castle, but I've made room for you in my schedule.
Get out of the way.
Or what? You'll scowl me to death? I don't miss, you know. Too bad you can't say the same.
One of my favorite performances is actually Detective Soap. Soap constantly finds himself completely out of his depth, trying to understand a man who has casually declared war on organized crime. His interactions with Frank provide some much needed comic relief and help break up the game's relentless violence.
Sure it stayed on the island.
So, you guessed that both the Nuccis and Russians were part of Wilson Fisk's criminal empire?
Alleged criminal empire.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Anyway, you connected the bloodstains and concluded he was behind all this. After all, who else could be controlling the Nuccis and Russians, dealing drugs, weapons, and slaves? Who but the kingpin of crime?
Alleged kingpin of crime, Soap.
The real star of the audio presentation, however, might be the interrogation dialogue. Volition recorded an absurd amount of unique lines for both Frank and his victims. Criminals beg for mercy. They try to negotiate. They lie. They panic. Some even attempt to act tough, right up until Frank introduces them to a nearby industrial accident waiting to happen.
I got nothing, man!
Oh! Oh! Oh!
There's Molotovs by the press in the corner.
These exchanges do more than entertainment. They help sell the fantasy that Frank Castle isn't simply shooting his way through levels, he's hunting people. Combined with Thomas Jane's performance, the result is one of the most authentic portrayals of the Punisher outside of the comics themselves. Even 20 years later, it's difficult to imagine anyone else delivering these lines quite the same. In conclusion, between the comic book presentation, the brutal sound design, and Thomas Jane's performance, Volition managed to capture something far more important. They captured the feeling of being Frank Castle. The game sold relatively well, even if it received mixed reception. There were plans for an eventual sequel, but the plans have been canned as THQ failed to procure the rights to the IP from Marvel. Volition started working on the sequel, and it was in the conceptual phase. Once the license was cancelled, THQ used all assets used on the sequel into what would eventually become Saints Row. In 2009, The Punisher: No Mercy was released as a PS3 exclusive, a first-person arena shooter. The game did not feature a single-player mode, and truthfully, it was shit. One of the worst games I had the displeasure of playing. The game was pulled from the stores in 2011 due to licensing issues between Marvel and the developer Zen Studios. making it effectively lost media. Hopefully. This marks the last video game based on the Punisher IP. Other games star the titular anti-hero, but no other plans to adapt the comics into a standalone game at this moment. Volition found success with the Saints Row series, but eventually THQ would go bankrupt in 2011, putting the team on hold indefinitely. They would be eventually bought by Deep Silver, then be bought by Gearbox Entertainment. They would release the god-awful Saints Row remake, and that would mark the end and complete and definitive closure of the studio. It's not the most happy ending, but I'm glad that this game exists, and that they were willing to make such controversial decisions. I hope we get a new Punisher game one day, and I hope it takes as much risk as this one did. When Gary Conway created the Punisher in 1974, he never expected the character to become one of Marvel's biggest icons. Frank Castle was supposed to be a one-off villain, a reflection of a troubled decade, a man consumed by grief, anger and violence. For over 50 years, the Punisher survived changing writers, changing audiences, interpretations, and decades, and it will keep surviving. If you enjoyed this video and want to support more long-form videos about games and pop culture, I have a Patreon link below. The videos stay free, but patrons get early access, behind-the-scenes posts, research notes, and their names in the credits on higher tiers. No pressure, watching the video already helps a lot. Thanks for watching.
Hey, it's that finisher dude.